You're on, Ann.
Oh, great. Hi, welcome to today's Administrative Committee meeting. It is Monday, October 26th. And as always, our first item on the regular agenda is the approval of the minutes, September 28, 2020 Admin Committee meeting minutes.
They were short and they look good to me.
Look good to me.
Agreed. So that moves us on to item number 2, acceptance of Behrman Estate land donation with Assistant Director, Parks and Rec Director David Schott.
Thank you, Councilor Zabala. Today we've got the Behrman Estate land donation. So the city's been approached by Mr. Graham, who is the personal representative of the estate of Katrina Behrman, and Mr. Norton, who is the attorney for that estate, regarding a gift of land from Mrs. Katrina Behrman through her will. If I can just orientate everybody real quick here. This is Behrman Creekside Park here. And then this is, I'll get to it, but this is a piece that was donated in 1996. And this is the strip right here that is the proposed land donation. So it's a 36.36 acre parcel on the western edge of Behrman Creekside Park. I would note that this 0.36 acres, it's a proposed gift from Mrs. Behrman, would be encumbered with a conservation easement, just like the property that was donated in 1996 right here. And it would be encumbered with those restrictions. It would be similar or the same as those restrictions from 1996, and that conservation easement with the Palouse Land Trust. So. Prevent the property from being subdivided. There's also a restriction in there that construction of any building structures or improvements are restricted to basically our amenities for open space, more of our passive recreation. We could put in benches, paths, trash cans, a structure up to 360 feet. So there's a restriction with the conservation easement. And then also there's no alteration of the land with the exception of constructing that bench, that pathway, things of that nature. So, like I said, it's essentially the same thing as happened in 1996 with the other piece of property that was donated. This is a picture of the property. I know it's hard to see, but so I'm standing in the middle of it, and so there's another stake up by the bus shelter and another stake down by the field here. It's about 32 feet of additional property on the western edge of Behrman Creekside Park. As we can see, it's pretty much just open field. Both Dwight and I do support the acceptance of this. It really fits with the theme of Behrman Creekside Park. We've had that conservation easement on that other piece, about 0.76 acres, for quite some time now. I meet with Palouse Land Trust once a year to do their inspection. They seem to be really pleased with the property. And the staff recommendation is also to accept the Behrman Estate land donation as well. So with that, I'd be happy to take any questions or take comments.
Yeah,
I'm curious, is this the only park in town that has a conservation easement? Or do we have other parks that have the same?
Councilor Zabala, it's a good question. I don't know off the top of my head. I'd have to look into that.
I'm unaware of any others that have conservation easements.
Mm-hmm. That was my only question. Thank you. Marina, Art, do you have anything that you'd like to ask?
Gary has a question.
Go for it, Gary.
If I may, oh,
Yeah, Gary has a question.
yeah, this was a piece of property that Katrina Behrman's estate, as any of you who knew Katrina, she died some years ago. The property was tied up in a limited partnership, and in probate, it has now been cleared for the estate to make the will bequest to go ahead and effectuate it. So in talking to John Norton, the attorney for the estate, The reason it's coming to you without a deed that has a conservation easement attached is he and Howie Graham, the personal representative of the estate, are meeting with the Palouse Land Trust to determine what those restrictions will be. It's likely, as Dave indicated, probably the same terms as the 1996 Land Trust, but that's yet to be determined. So they'll get that done this week. We'll be bringing it to you on Monday, and then the city council can accept it if this is put on the regular agenda. By way of the legal authority, the only way that property is donated to the city and the city accepts it is through an official acceptance. So someone can't just donate property to the city and the city has to take it. So the action for the council would be, or the committee today, is to recommend acceptance by the city council of the property with the attached conservation easement at the next council meeting.
So regular agenda then?
Well, still have questions here.
So if you go back to that original map that kind of showed you where that strip was, we go back to that for a second?
Oh, yeah.
Didn't know I was asking for something.
Stop sharing so that we can see it.
Yeah. No, it's not a map.
Yep.
There we go. There we go. Can you help me figure out what those, immediately to the left, there's a big hunk of land. Can you tell me what that is?
5.3 acres. That is property that is not part of this transaction.
Okay.
It was, I believe that it was a different bequest in Mrs. Berman's will, but not to the city.
Okay, because it looked like it was all part of something, and I just didn't know how that fit in there.
This all started with Mrs. Berman's property, so it's just been subdivided out. Piece of it was given for the Steiner right-of-way when the Steiner LID went through in 1992-93. A piece of property, the original Berman Creekside Park, a piece adjacent to that was gifted with a gift deed and a conservation easement, and it was all the rest of the property was distributed by will.
Is the whole yellow there, the entire part of her property that she then subdivided out?
I believe so. If you look at the far western edge, that's Highway 95. Mrs. Berman's property is just immediately as you're heading north, just to the right off of Highway 95. And Steiner Avenue is the property, or the right-of-way to the bottom of the picture here.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so Dave, this is pretty short notice for Parks and Rec, but any thoughts about what to do with the addition to the park? Tree plantings, other landscaping, lawn mowing?
Right. Great question, Art. As far as, we'd have to discuss it further, but I think it would mimic the existing conservation easement piece of ground to the east. We generally mow it. The kids sled on it during the winter, and so it would just be additional property. We don't have any plans for any additional pathways, benches, things of that nature at this point.
Okay, thanks.
Great. All right. Well, thank you so much, David.
Thank you.
All right. Well, actually, I guess, do we need a motion then to add that to the regular agenda? Or can we just-
Actually, typically committees move forward by consensus. If it's a
Yeah.
unanimous consensus, then it moves on to council.
And it is.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah,
Okay.
so I'd like to move it on with a positive recommendation. It's a very generous move on the part of the Bierman Estate, and I think it makes a nice addition to the park.
I second it.
Agreed.
So consent or regular?
I
think
would
it was
recommend that it go to regular.
Okay, just so that everybody can vote on it? Yeah. It's also something
Okay,
kind of
great.
fun to celebrate, and so why not get everybody to be able to talk about it and enjoy it?
Something nice for a change.
Thank you.
Something nice, a little park extension. So for item number 3, we have the proposal to develop plan to address potential for gender neutral restroom conversion with Deputy City Supervisor Jen Piffner.
Good afternoon, counselors. Are you able to see my presentation?
We can.
Yep.
Perfect. Okay. So this, just a brief presentation. This is at the request of the mayor who, in response to some inquiries and encouragement from citizens and the Human Rights Commission, asked us to look into just preliminary research to determine the potential for converting city-owned restrooms to gender-neutral facilities. Specifically what we've looked at here, and let me make sure I can advance the slide here. There we go. Some specific things we looked in the short term, a review of gender-neutral restrooms and policies in Idaho. We looked at a sample of, I think it was 10 cities, to provide some background on how other municipalities have either addressed this or not addressed this. Took a quick look at the inventory of the existing City of Moscow facilities, and then looked at what considerations we would want to involve, just a quick brainstorm to get us started. Certainly not limited to these things of safety, privacy, number of fixtures, accessibility, and then costs. So just a quick overview of what we found there, looking to see if the committee would like us to move forward or recommend to the council that we move forward within a more formal planning process. So the research that was pulled together, many thanks to Taylor Riedner in administration for her research on this, helps quite handily. She did a great job of this. So we broke it down into of the communities that we looked at, those that have the gender specific. You've got a little cheat sheet here on the top right of the slide where it says either women or men. We had one of our cities say that they have not created any gender neutral facilities in particular. They are still gender specific, and that was Caldwell. The bulk of our comparison cities have approached it in more of a family or a multi-user type plan. And so that would have some of the signage. It's not specific, but the signage that you see at the top right there would be more in keeping with some of these approaches that these communities have done. A lot of these folks are doing this intentionally. That's purpose built, or they're converting existing. They're finding, especially from Spokane, they've made this special note that requests for family facilities are higher than gender neutral. It's situations where parents want to or need to help kiddos that are using those facilities, and then being able to go into one or the other is more flexible for them. These folks are also doing some specific targeted purpose built. Meridian in particular is one that's doing purpose built. Others are still, again, using those replacement type things. Lewiston, we've got a little bit more information to grab from them there, but they do have some family facilities in City Hall in their library. You'll see most of these are the more publicly facing facilities, city halls, rec centers, parks, those kinds of things. And then at the next level, we do have Boise and Idaho Falls are specifically more gender neutral. And so that's just, again, a sample of the kind of signage that would go with that. They are being much more proactive on this, it seems. They have more existing facilities. You'll see purpose built in both areas. Boise in particular is doing purpose built for a lot of their new construction, for all of their new construction. And then their next phase would be to convert after their new facilities are in place. The policy on this one is of interest, and I've noted the policy that they cited on the next slide, so we'll get there in just a minute. Boise has not gotten any public input on gender neutral, but they're getting a great response from families in that family-friendly type facility. And their goal is to have gender neutral in all their facilities. Idaho Falls, they haven't had any public input. They did mention that they had a significant amount of public input on their non-discrimination policy, which I'll share here in just a moment. They do have future plans to continue to increase the gender neutral facilities in all of their buildings. So just real quick on the policy statements, these are very similar, and the City of Moscow's is listed next. And this is their City of Boise's code and the City of Idaho Falls code. And it's that non-discrimination piece that we have, again, similar to Moscow's. The purpose to ensure all persons, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, expression, full benefits of citizenship. We find a lot of these also apply to affordable housing and some of those type of policies or resolutions, as well as job type things. We say, I think this was just reviewed in HR and the policy review and equal opportunity employer. Some of those kinds of things also applies. Again, Idaho Falls, Boise, similar statements. And then here is Moscow's, again, Discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and or gender identity expression shall be prohibited as set out in this chapter. Ensure all persons, regardless of sexual orientation or gender expression, are afforded equal opportunities for employment, housing, commercial property, and in the use of public accommodation. So we do have that similar non-discrimination policy as the other two entities that we looked at that are using that as the basis for moving towards a more gender neutral facility for all their public facilities. That takes us to a quick facility inventory. So we have quite a few that we broke down into several categories, and thanks to Dwight Curtis and Dave Schott for their help with this. Jay Lewis also as our facilities maintenance manager. So we've got parks, and we broke this into two. We've got parks that have built-in restrooms or facilities, and then we've got parks that have portable facilities. And you may have seen the press release that recently went out that as winter comes on, some of those portable facilities come back in for the winter, and we'll deploy those again in the spring. So we have about 50-50 on our parks as facilities that currently have at least a type of gender neutral. And then we've got our other parks where we're looking at, okay, and we'll get to this in the user considerations here in a minute. What would we need to do to shift those into a gender neutral type facility or even a family facility? And then on the other side of the screen here, we have the city occupied facilities. These are where we have actual city employees are in these buildings. There are a few that we have partnerships with. Fire Station 1, for instance, that would be a place where Moscow volunteers are involved in that. So we've got other user groups that we'd want to consider as well. I'll highlight that again here in just a moment. So then we have city owned facilities. These are facilities that the city does own, but we don't necessarily occupy. 1912 Center, Library, Virgil Phillips Farm. It's one that's out there, but falls into that category. And then Animal Shelter, and then the Intermodal Transit Center. So just a different breakdown of the facilities and the different considerations that we'd want to keep in mind, and the user groups there. We'll talk about that more here in just a minute. And I apologize, my percentages are gone on my pie chart here. It's supposed to give a quick and easy overview of what this might take for implementation should we go down this road. So I'll talk you through it. So our portables, we have our 9 seasonal parks that have portables. That's that 16% that is showing up. Locks and signs. So that would be anything, any facility where we could either add a lock, change signage, very simple changes. Either the apparatus or the equipment in those buildings or those facilities is such that it's a single user type situation, and we could make fairly simple adjustments. That's the big half of the pie, basically. We've got about half of our facilities where we feel like that would be an appropriate option. And then we've got the blended options. These are 8 buildings and there's 16 facilities. A City Hall, for instance, would be a good example. We've got 3 floors, we've got 6 restrooms, currently 3 gender specific for male and female. It could be a blended option of maybe second floor where council chambers is gender neutral, and then the first and third floor remain gender specific. So we've got some opportunities there with some buildings. And then the ones that need additional consideration, these are the ones that there's not an easy fix that's foreseeable in how we could accommodate a gender neutral setup. This would be Friendship Square, Mountain View Park, and then the Intermodal Transportation Center. And these are typically where we have facilities. We have gender specific for male and female. And say the female restrooms have 6 stalls within that. By simply locking the door, then you're eliminating the number of fixtures that are available. So we need to figure out a plan for that. We haven't, of course, gone down that road. That would take considerable more thinking and planning. But we do know that that's not most of our facilities. That's just some of them. So we talked about those user considerations. First, on the left-hand side, it's public access, it's employee access. In facilities where we don't have the public in as often, what are the staff needs at this point? That's another way we could phase implementation, or just making sure that people have access to the facilities that they need and will use. Accessibility overall, this is something we think about, and any time we look at facilities and making sure public members and the employees have access, ADA access, those types of things. Again, those available fixtures, that blended option or additional considerations. How do we make sure we have, if you've got 12 fixtures between 6 male and 6 female, but then you put a lock on it and you're down to 2, we want to be able to mitigate that a bit. We still want to have access for as many people as appropriate in those spaces. And then safety is a big concern. And so I think it was Gary spoke with Chief Fry, and Chief Fry checked in with the Idaho Chiefs of Police Association and reported there around the state, no negative issues have been determined, haven't had any issues there. And then Chief Fry and I followed up last week, and he was going to check with his contacts with the FBI to see if there's any other national information that we would want to include there. Again, user groups are going to be really important, especially for those facilities that we own but don't necessarily occupy. The 1912 Center, the library, Virgil Phillips Farm, Animal Shelter, Intermodal Transit Center, Moscow Volunteer Fire Department, of course. There are 3 of our facilities there. And then the Human Rights Commission would be a great sounding board as well. And then we would be able to open that up to ensure that we're getting good community input as we need to through the process as well. With that, are there any questions? Anything I can answer or other information you're looking for?
Art and Marine, I'm just processing.
Actually, we
Some information
only
shared.
have a handful of places that have multi-stalls that we really have to look at and convert, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. That makes it much easier.
It does. I mean, those individual, that small piece of the pie there, it'll take considerably more to retrofit those. There may be construction, there may be remodeling, those types of things, but it's not the bulk of our facilities, which is nice.
Well, have you looked at all at the question of whether or not we would ever make a multi-stall facility for being gender neutral?
We have not gone down that. That would be one of the considerations we would look at if we were directed to go forward with the planning project.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea to go forth and maintain gender neutrality with future facilities. I think the tripping point is what do we do with some of the multi-stall facilities we have now in order to accommodate, and that's going to be the expensive one. The easy ones are all of the unistall ones already, just hang a different sign on the door and you're good to go, maybe adopt a locking mechanism. But other than that, I think the big issue is going to be the current multi-stalls as opposed to anything in the future or anything smaller. And that's where we're going to spend probably 95% of our time.
I mean, because basically that raises the question on will we ever have multi-stall, gender-neutral bathrooms? And that is the question. And so, I mean, the fact is, it would cost more money, blah, blah, blah. But the question is, before you even get to that issue in terms of cost, there's just the question with respect to safety, with respect to single stall versus multi-stall units. Is somebody looking at that, Jen?
Absolutely, that's what we would be looking at if we are directed to move forward with the planning.
Okay.
If I may.
Make a recommendation?
Yes,
Carrie's
yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the whole purpose for this was to come forward with an inventory, some of the background information, and where does the council want to go from here? When looking at this, we looked at different considerations. For instance, this facility Jen mentioned, where we have 6 separate bathrooms, gender specific. You have the ability to have some of those facilities gender neutral while still maintaining, finding out what the employees want. Do the employees, are they more comfortable with gender specific or gender neutral? So trying to cover as many bases as possible. The multi-stall facilities where they're single purpose facilities, the downtown restroom is built for one thing. People using the downtown restroom. So it was built gender specific. That discussion did go on when that building was being designed, and at that point, the direction was to move forward. So going back, retrofitting that, really what we're looking for today is just the recommendation to go to council with this report and get direction on developing and hopefully looking at some of the issues that'll be dealt with and what those costs will be, and then bringing that back to council for formal adoption and moving forward.
So having said that, I fully support and appreciate the work that you've done on this and encourage you, at least as one person on council, to continue looking into those issues. I am the liaison now for the Human Rights Commission, and they are interested in seeing that. I will also say that at the meetings for the Human Rights Commission, they were talking about the issue of whether or not it, like the wordage and the verbiage in terms of, is this neutral, or is it gender neutral, or is it some other title that you put on there? Because the issue is that creating gender neutral bathrooms have advantages to more than just people that are trans or gay or whatever. But so there is also the other aspect of that in terms of some people with wheelchairs and some people with, other needs and small children that they need to take in there, and family friendly. So it becomes that question on which are we going to, do we make it broad or do we make it specific? I like the broad concept because I think it's more appealing to more people.
So then I think the question is just, do we want to include a recommendation as a committee when forwarding on to the full council?
Oh, my recommendation is that it goes to council and they all get this opinion and we can then hear everybody's opinion on it.
I agree. Art, how do you
I think
feel?
so too, yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much, Jen, for all that information.
Thank you.
You want that on
And
the
that
regular
brings-
agenda?
Oh, yeah.
Please.
Yes.
Okay,
Please.
thank you.
That brings us to our last item, which is a report, and that is the Water Conservation Program report with Nicole Baker.
Good afternoon, counselors. I'm here to give you our conservation updates and let you know how our program is doing. All of you know the history of our water resource, so I'll be brief. The city has been, we do pump from two aquifers, the Wanapum and the Grand Ronde. The Grand Ronde is a shared resource, and it is currently declining at 0.9 of a foot a year. So the city's been serious about conservation through the decades. We supply reclaimed water to the University of Idaho for green spaces since the 70s. In fact, this year we supplied 75 million gallons, so that's 75 million gallons. We're not pumping from our declining aquifer. We're also very active members of the Palouse Basin Aquifer Committee, which is, PBAC. In 1992, PBAC they set voluntary goals for all of the pumping entities, us included. And since that time, we have a program that's become more robust over the years, starting with a device program and then a PI, or public information and education program. And more recently, we have the approved water conservation plan approved by council in 2016. So today I want to focus on what's happened since that plan was implemented. So with any program, it's only as good as our participation. In the past, the city communicated our conservation message and the programs that were available to our residents through the Water Matters newsletter. This was a pretty effective way to get in touch with our customers. It went out to over 11,000 households. However, it was pretty expensive, and we have found, looking into the future, it wasn't as effective. Back 10 years ago, I would get a lot of calls and questions, based on after a mailing, and it was a quarterly mailing. And that just sort of dropped off over the years. So we thought, well, let's be more cost effective. And with the use of social media and public service announcements and targeted mailings, we could be perhaps more effective with a much more cost-prohibited, plan. And so, for instance, this targeted mailing, that postcard you see on that slide, that was sent out to residents that were in neighborhoods that most likely had the older toilets versus a newer neighborhood. And that saves you money, and that mailing went out late 2019. So the reason I segue into this slide from that postcard discussion is the postcard had a significant response from our residents. So essentially, we had the most successful toilet rebate year this last fiscal year. And you can see the commercial customer increase drastically. And I had customers call and say, I didn't know about this program. I got this postcard. Please tell me about that. And so that communication starts. And we had 3 hotels upgrade every single toilet from that postcard mailing. Right now, this toilet rebate program saves over 4 million gallons annually, and keep in mind, that's savings we see every year. Those toilets aren't going away, so with every toilet upgrade, we look to saving even more water over the years. Also included in the approved water conservation plan was the Wisescape rebate as well. Now, the Wisescape program, which Wisescape is water efficient landscaping on the Palouse, that program already existed, but it was essentially where we recognized those individuals making water conscientious, choices with their landscaping. So this was a rebate program to support that. And you can see in the upper right, there's just an overlook graph of how our pumping changes during the irrigation season. And, I circled that area. That's all for our outdoor landscape use. And of course, we need green spaces, ball fields for everybody to come and share and play on. But with that front yard, you have essentially, most people, I say, start with the front yard. You're not playing, ball in the front yard. This house, the reason I have it up is, I noticed in all the years, first it was talking to Wisescapers about the Wisescape Award, and now I do pre and post sites for the rebate. And I can say over the years, folks were concerned about what their neighbor thought. Oh gosh, they're not going to like that I don't have my green lawn. And now it's a different perspective. More and more people are seeing their neighbors change out that lawn and putting it into perennials and shrubs and having diversity in their yard, and they're liking it. And they're seeing what their neighbors are doing, and they're finding out, hey, what is that? And they find out about the program because what they're doing in the neighborhood. This particular house received a rebate in 2019. And I will say, not only their neighbors have noticed this house, but people not even close to their neighborhood. I have gone to pre and post sites and they said, oh yeah, that one house, I really loved it. And that really motivated me to make that change. So our residents really doing it and showing the success makes all the difference with these programs. Well, in addition to our community making the change, the city likes to lead by example. And here at City Hall, we have had 3 sections of our area converted from irrigated lawn to a Wisescape. This section was planted this year. It added about 800 square feet. The original section, it was planted in 2016, just in front by the sign. That was about 1,500 square feet, and we expanded out in 2019 toward the bike shelter. So that was about 300 square feet. But I want to add, when you change out your Wisescape, of course, that first year is going to use a little bit more water because you're establishing plants. It uses about the same amount of water as, an efficiently irrigated lawn. But then as your plants are established, you use less and less. So I will say that 1,500 square foot section at City Hall, plus the expansion on the east side by the bike shelter, which is another 300, so about 1,800 square feet. That section only used a little over 1,700 gallons of water this year. If we were efficiently irrigating that same space with lawn, and I have to note most lawns are not efficiently irrigated, we would have used at least 20,000 gallons. So it makes a difference. In addition to a Wisescape, saving water, it also can, be aesthetically pleasing. Here's a section where the city already had an existing Wisescape. There wasn't a lot of resources going into this median on the sea couplet area. But with the infrastructure improvements and the new art piece called the Homecoming being installed, it was a perfect time to give that area sort of a facelift. And so we were able to put in plants. I mean, that's a rough area to plant for. You have radiant heat all summer long. You have snow loads and debris from the road. So, and then I worked with the artists to see, and of course Parks and Rec to see, they need low maintenance because that's an area that it's hard to get to. And you don't want to be spending a lot of labor time out there either. And we chose, I chose plants that complemented the artwork. So when these plants are fully grown, they'll be undulating in the wind, which the artwork is also our Palouse fields, and we all are aware of the seas of green in the springtime. So that's the, idea behind this. So here we already had an area that wasn't using a lot of resources, but we can still make it a welcoming intro in the north end of our city. Okay, so I did mention that the PI program, or the information and education program, that already existed, and of course we are always trying to make this a better program. This is Kelly Cooper's. She's in charge of this program, and she's done an amazing job. When this program first started, we'd be lucky to see a few hundred students, and look, you can see before COVID hit, Kelly was out there at the classrooms and the clubs. I mean, that was a significant increase and it's all done in-house now. We have she's created 9 new lesson plans. She is always updating those and, essentially getting feedback from the schools and the students and, figuring out how can I make this particular lesson plan better. But of course, with our COVID times, going and doing face-to-face outreach is not, is not going to work. So we thought, well, how can we spend our energy and still, letting the folks know about our conservation message. And Kelly spoke with the Moscow School District, and they're very interested. So we're hoping by the end of next year, we're going to have vinyl wraps that show our conservation message, and at least one in each school in Moscow. And this one is the charter school, the Palouse Prairie Charter School. This is the first one we're going to try. It was sort of an easy trial run for us because you see those footprints there, and those footprints are based off of a lesson plan, and they had an artist come in to help them as well. And it's essentially the students made a footprint of their own foot and enlarged it to scale, and they learned about their water footprint, which is Stephen Leahy's book. He wrote this book talking about our indirect and direct water use. So it's more than just turning what we use in our house when you brush your teeth or take a shower, but how much water it takes to make that, pair of pants you're wearing or the apple you're about to eat. So in a sense, you have imported water through the goods that we purchase. So these students took a statistic out of that book that they found significant to themselves and put that into that footprint. So we're going to take the students' footprints and make a vinyl wrap for that. Okay, so I discussed all of the things we're doing. So what does that mean for our pumping? Here's a look at our overall pumping. So it's important to show this is, what we pump for, public spaces as well as for all of our residents and businesses, all the pumping and the city. Now, I thought it would be interesting to show you the difference between what we pumped with the Grand Ron, which is the blue bar, and the orange bar, which is the Wanapump. Historically, we have pumped 30% of our water from the Wanapump, and that's a more shallow well. It has more iron in it. And what that means is when you use more of that water, you're going to backflush our filters more, and you're going to do more flushing at hydrants. And that means we're using more water. So with operational changes, we are seeing conservation efforts just on the city level. I mean, if you think about it, the city of Moscow is we're a big water consumer in the sense that we have infrastructure, and these our production crew have to make sure that we have limited loss in our infrastructure. And now with these operational changes, with reducing how much we flush and how much we have to backwash, makes a big difference on saving water. So I thought it would be also interesting to note how we are making a difference on an individual level. So the other slide was the city as a whole, us all working together. Now this is how our individual water use, it compares to our national average and the Idaho average. So essentially this is the billed water. So this is what we are sending into people's homes and businesses. That's different than what we are actually pumping as a whole. And as you can see that I wanted to see a more historical use for per capita. So I went back 10 years. You can see Moscow is at 81 gallons per person per day, which is even less than our national average. I mean, it's way less than Idaho average. So then I decided it would be interesting to look at how are we doing during the water conservation plan years. So that plan I considered was implemented in 2016, so I started from that. And you can see that perhaps from just more messaging, taking advantage of these programs, folks are using less water, even within that time frame. And then, of course, a snapshot of just a year, it's even less. So I just really hope people can take from this slide that it seems like such a big problem, our water resources declining. But if you can make an individual choice, this really shows that every drop counts. And the community, the added effect of everybody that is using less water really does make a difference as part of the solution to our water concerns. So here's some art from last year that we did, which we blend science and art together. And I thought I should give a shout out to Fabs again for that. But with that, I'll take any questions.
I don't have any, but nice report. I really like the progress we're making and reflected in the statistics you presented. So good for Moscow's citizens.
Agreed.
My only regret is I did this long before you guys started giving me baits on it. So we changed my toilets out and I xeriscaped my front yard and I thought, oh, but I love it. So I really appreciate the work that Moscow does on it and picking up on it. And it was worth it back in the days when you just had little awards for people doing it.
Thank you.
I just want to thank Nicole for all the work she's done on the Wisescape. The out front's a beautiful piece. I've heard tons of comments about it, and people react very well to that, and they like it, and they want to put it in their own lawns. So that's a program that's been a success.
Thank you.
I think, yeah, showing examples is a really great idea.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole.
All right, well, that's it for today. Anyone have a motion to adjourn?
Let's go.
So move, let's go.
All right, have a nice
It's a
afternoon,
first and a
everyone.
second.
Yeah.